Dennis had one warm foot and one cold foot, and he'd spent a year blaming it on bad circulation. But two cold feet and one cold foot are not the same problem. Two is usually just age. One foot going cold is an artery closing off the same kind of artery that closes in a heart attack. Except this one feeds his leg. By the time he sat on my table, that foot was pale and going numb, and he almost lost it. He'd felt the warning for months and called it normal. So I'm going to show you exactly which leg symptoms you can watch at home, which ones mean call your doctor this week, and the one that means call 911 tonight and do not drive yourself. My name is Dr. Tom, and I put in years as a board-certified emergency doctor working American ERs. Legs and feet are one of the places the body lies to you the most. They ache, they get cold, they tingle, and every one of those things can be completely harmless. Or it can be the very first thing your circulatory system does when it's in trouble, months, sometimes years, before anything shows up on a heart test. The problem isn't that people ignore their bodies. It's that nobody ever taught them how to tell the quiet, ordinary version of these symptoms, apart from the dangerous one. That's the whole point of today. I'm going to lay these warning signs out as a ladder, from the ones you can simply keep an eye on, up to the ones that are a genuine emergency. By the end, you won't just have a list of scary symptoms. You'll have a way to sort your own legs and to watch it, call about it, or act on it right now. And I want to start by clearing up the single biggest myth I hear, because it's the one that kept Dennis at home for a year. Here's the belief. Cold feet, heavy legs, a little numbness after you sit, that's just poor circulation, and poor circulation is just part of getting older. And here's what worries me about that sentence. Half of it is true, which is exactly what makes it dangerous. Some slowing of circulation really is a normal part of aging, but the phrase poor circulation gets used like a diagnosis, when it's really just a description of a feeling. It doesn't tell you why the blood isn't getting there. And there are a handful of very different reasons, sitting right next to each other, that feel almost identical from the outside and could not be more different in what they mean for your life. So before we climb the ladder, let me give you the 60-second version of what's actually happening down there, because every sign after this makes sense once you see it. Picture your heart as a pump in the center of your body, and your feet as the farthest outpost from that pump. Blood has to travel all the way down against nothing, and then all the way back up against gravity. The vessels that carry it aren't dead pipes. When you're young, your arteries are like fresh rubber hose. They flex with every heartbeat and push the blood along. The smooth inner lining, a layer called the endothelium, makes a tiny molecule called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is the signal that tells the vessel to relax and open wide. As the years go by, two things drift. The hose stiffens. The lining makes less nitric oxide. Vessels don't open as easily. Blood moves slower, and it tends to pool in the lowest part of you, your lower legs and feet. That is the ordinary, both sides, gradual heaviness, and coolness that a lot of healthy people feel after 60. It's real, and by itself, it's usually not an emergency. But sitting on top of that gentle background, there are three specific machines that can break, and each one has a fingerprint. One is the arteries clogging with plaque, which starves the tissue of blood. One is the nerves themselves getting damaged, usually by blood sugar, which is a wiring problem, not a plumbing problem. And one is a clot forming in a deep vein, which is a blockage in the return line and can turn into a life threat in hours. Keep those three in your head, because the entire ladder is really just learning to tell them apart. Let me start at the bottom, with the signs that are usually the gentle background, the ones you watch, not the ones you panic over. The first is that heavy, tired, sandbag feeling in both legs at the end of the day, especially after you've been on your feet or, oddly, after you've been sitting too long. When it's on both sides, comes on slowly, and eases when you put your feet up, that's most often the ordinary pooling I just described. The second is cold feet again, Both feet, fairly equal, worse in a cold room, better under a blanket or a warm pair of socks. If a warm sock fixes it, that's a reassuring sign. It means the blood can still get there. It's just moving slowly. And the third is that pins and needles tingling that shows up after you've had your legs crossed or sat too long and then fades within a few minutes once you move. That's usually just temporary pressure on a nerve, the same thing as your arm falling asleep. None of those three, on their own, on both sides, coming and going, are a reason to rush anywhere. But they are a reason to pay attention, because they're the floor. Everything more serious is measured against them. Now let's climb. Because here is the rule that separates the gentle background from the things I actually care about. And if you remember nothing else from this whole video, remember this one. The dangerous version of almost every leg symptom is one-sided. Symmetry is your friend. When both legs feel heavy, both feet run cool, both sides tingle after sitting, that pattern is usually about aging and slow flow. But when one leg is clearly different from the other, one foot colder, one calf more swollen, one side that hurts and the other doesn't, that asymmetry is your body telling you something specific and local has gone wrong on that side. Your two legs are the same age. They have the same blood pressure and the same blood sugar. So when they stop matching, aging is no longer a good explanation. Something is blocking one pipe and not the other. This is the part that got Dennis. Both his feet had been a little cool for years, and he'd made peace with it. So when one foot started running colder than the other, he filed it under the same old story. Poor circulation, getting older, and he didn't notice that the story had quietly changed from both to one. That change is the whole ballgame. So here's what I want you to do tonight, and it costs nothing. Sit down, put your bare feet side by side, and actually compare them. Same color? Same temperature when you touch the top of each foot? Same feeling when you press a fingernail on each big toe and let go? Does the color come back at the same speed? You're not looking for perfection. You're looking for a difference between the two. 2 feet that match, even if they're both a bit cool, is a far more reassuring picture than 1 foot that's fallen behind. Now let me tell you what that one-sided coldness usually means, because this is the belief disruption that matters most. That story about poor circulation of age hides a real named disease, and it has a name your doctor uses: peripheral artery disease, or PAD. According to the CDC, roughly 6.5 million Americans over 40 have it, and a huge share of them have no idea because the early version doesn't scream. It whispers exactly the way ordinary aging whispers. PAD has plaqued the same cholesterol and calcium buildup you've heard about in heart arteries, except it's narrowing the arteries that feed your legs. And here is the sentence I most want you to hear today. PAD in your leg is not a leg problem. It is a whole body signal. If plaque is closing the arteries to your feet, the very same process is almost certainly at work in the arteries to your heart and your brain. That's why the American Heart Association treats PAD as a powerful predictor of heart attack and stroke. The cold foot isn't the disease. It's the smoke detector for the disease, which means the person who catches it in their foot and acts may be catching a heart attack years before it happens. That is a gift, not a sentence, but only if you don't dismiss it as normal aging. So how does PAD announce itself before it ever gets to a pale, numb, emergency foot? It has a signature symptom, and it is one of the most reliable clues in all of medicine. So learn it. It's called claudication, and it works like a clock. You set off walking, and after a fairly predictable stretch, half a block, 1 block, 2 a cramping, aching, tired, or squeezing pain grips you, usually in the calf, now and then in the thigh or the buttock. You halt. After a minute or 2 of standing still, the pain lets go. You start up again, and it returns at roughly that same distance. That predictability is the fingerprint. A muscle with a narrowed artery gets enough blood to sit still, but not enough to work, so it complains the moment you ask it to work and quiets the moment you stop. If your legs do, that pain that arrives with walking and reliably leaves with rest that is not just being out of shape. That is a specific message from a specific narrowed artery, and it deserves a call to your doctor, not a shrug. There are quieter PAD clues too, sitting on the skin, and most people never connect them. When a leg has been short on blood flow for a long time, the tissue changes. The skin on the shin can get thin, shiny, and tight. The hair on the lower leg and toes thins out or disappears. Toenails grow slowly and get thick and brittle. A small cut or scrape on that foot takes far longer to heal than it should. Any one of those, especially on one side more than the other, is worth mentioning. And there's a simple test your doctor can do in the office that settles the question in about 10 minutes. It's called an ankle brachial index, or ABI. They take the blood pressure in your ankle and compare it to the blood pressure in your arm. If the ankle number is a lot lower, blood is struggling to get down there, and you've caught PAD without a single needle or scan. If you have that predictable walking pain or one-sided skin changes, that's the test to ask for by name. Let me guess what you're thinking right now, that your feet look completely normal, so this can't be you. I want to gently push on that, because it's the exact assumption that hurts people. Remember, a large share of people with PAD have no dramatic symptoms at all, or symptoms so mild they've folded them into getting older. Normal-looking feet do not rule this out. The people who do best are almost never the ones with the worst symptoms. They're the ones who noticed the small mismatch early and asked one good question. You're not looking for a crisis. You're looking for a pattern before it becomes a crisis. Before we climb higher, I have to add a fourth machine to the three I gave you, because it's extremely common after 60, and it fools people constantly. So far, we've talked about the arteries carrying blood down, the nerves, and clots in the deep veins. But there's also the everyday return system, the ordinary veins that carry blood back up your legs against gravity. Inside those veins are tiny one-way valves, like little doors that snap shut so blood can't fall backward between heartbeats. As we age, those valves can wear out and stop sealing. When they leak, blood slides back down and pools in the lower leg. Doctors call it chronic venous insufficiency, and it is one of the biggest reasons older legs feel heavy and swell. Here's how the venous pattern looks, because it has its own fingerprint. The heaviness and swelling peak by evening and ease by morning, after a night spent lying flat because overnight gravity wasn't fighting you. It often comes with visible rope-like varicose veins, or a dull ache and a tight, full feeling, rather than the cramping pain of a starved artery. Over time, you may see the skin around the ankle turn brownish or leathery. And here's the key difference from PAD. The artery problem, claudication, hurts when you walk and eases when you stop. The vein problem is the reverse. It feels worse when you stand still for a long time and better when you walk or put your feet up. Walking pumps the blood back up. Standing lets it pool. So one simple question sorts a lot of this out. Does it hurt more when you walk or more when you stand around? Walk or stand? Walking worse points toward the arteries. Standing worse points toward the veins. Two questions, two very different problems. Now, why does this matter if it's just veins? Two reasons. First, venous insufficiency is usually the more benign of these problems, and that's genuinely reassuring. It's uncomfortable. It's not typically limb-threatening, and there's a lot you can do about it. But second, it can be tricky, because both-sided venous swelling can hide a one-sided DVT sitting inside it. That's why the rule from earlier still rules everything. If the swelling is roughly equal on both sides and it's been slowly building for months, that's the venous pattern, and you can raise it at a routine visit. But if one leg swells noticeably more than the other, especially over hours or a day or two, and it's tender and warm, you're back to the clot conversation. And that's not a wait and see. Here's the hopeful part, and it's immediate. If your pattern is the venous one, heavy, swollen legs that are worst at night and better in the morning, the things that help are simple, and they're mostly in your control. Elevate your legs above the level of your heart for 15 or 20 minutes a couple of times a day. That lets the pooled blood drain the easy way. Keep moving, because your calf muscles are actually a second pump. Every step squeezes those veins and pushes blood upward, which is why sitting or standing still for hours is the worst thing for these legs, and a short walk is one of the best. And ask your doctor whether graduated compression stockings would help you. People hear compression stockings and picture something medical and unpleasant. But for the right person, they're one of the most effective and lowest risk tools we have. They gently squeeze from the ankle up and give those worn-out valves a hand. Just get the arterial side checked first, because if the arteries are badly narrowed, tight stockings aren't the answer. One more reason that 10-minute ankle versus arm test earns its keep. Now we step up another rung to the signs that don't mean panic, but do mean this week, not someday. The first is a sore, a blister, or a cut on your foot or toe that is not healing. On a foot with good blood flow, a small nick closes up in a week or two. On a foot that's starved for blood, it can sit there for weeks or slowly get worse, because healing itself requires circulation. A wound that won't close on the lower leg or foot is one of the clearest signals that the tissue isn't getting what it needs, and it is a same-week call, especially if you have diabetes, because a small, unhealed sore on a diabetic foot is how a lot of serious problems begin. Do not wait it out. This is the kind of thing urgent care and your doctor would much rather see early than late. The second this week sign is pain in your feet at rest, particularly at night, in bed, when your legs are up and level with your heart. People describe a deep ache or burning in the toes and forefoot that wakes them. And here's the tell that makes doctors sit up. It gets better when they hang the foot off the side of the bed or stand up. That's gravity doing the work the artery can't. When a leg only gets enough blood with help from gravity, the narrowing has become severe, and that is a prompt evaluation, not a wait and see. Now I have to separate two things that feel almost the same but come from opposite machines, because getting this wrong sends people down the wrong path. Cold, numb, tingling feet can come from the arteries, a plumbing problem, too little blood. But they can also come from the nerves, a wiring problem, and the most common cause of that, by far, is diabetes. The National Institute of Diabetes says roughly half of people with diabetes develop some nerve damage, called neuropathy, over time. Neuropathy usually shows up on both feet at once. In a stocking pattern, numbness and burning and pins and needles that creep up symmetrically from the toes, and it often has nothing to do with a warm sock. The reason this matters so much is the dangerous overlap. A person with diabetes can have both problems at the same time: poor blood flow and dead nerves, which means an artery can be closing, and the very alarm that should warn them, pain, has been switched off. That's why, if you have diabetes, looking at your feet every single day is not fussing. It's how you see the danger your nerves can no longer feel. And now we reach the top of the ladder, the two situations where the right move is not to monitor, not to schedule, but to act tonight. Learn these cold, because minutes matter. The first is a blood clot in a deep vein of the leg. Doctors call it a DVT. Here's the picture. One calf or one leg becomes swollen over hours to a day or two, and it's usually warm, sometimes reddish or dusky, and it aches or feels tight and tender, often in the calf. One-sided again, that's the pattern. This is a clot jamming the return line, the vein carrying blood back up to your heart. The reason a DVT is an emergency isn't mainly the leg. It's that a piece of that clot can break loose, travel up to your lungs, and block blood flow there, a pulmonary embolism which can be fatal. This is not a rare, exotic thing. The CDC puts the yearly toll at up to 900,000 Americans struck by these blood clots,
with 60 to 100,000 of them dying.
A new, one-sided, swollen, painful calf is a get-seen-now situation. Go to the ER. And if it comes with sudden shortness of breath, chest pain, or coughing that doesn't fit, that clot may already be in the lungs. That's 911. Immediately. Do not drive yourself. The second top of the ladder emergency is the one that nearly cost Dennis his leg a sudden complete loss of blood flow to a foot, what we call acute limb ischemia. This is the artery version, and it can happen fast, over hours. Doctors memorize it as the 6 Ps, and you can too. Pain that comes on suddenly and severely. Pallor, the foot goes pale, white, or waxy. Pulselessness, you can't feel a pulse in the foot. Paresthesia, deep numbness, not tingling, real loss of feeling. Paralysis, you can't move the foot or toes well. And poikilothermia, which just means the foot goes cold, often coldly different from the other one. A foot that suddenly turns pale, cold, numb, and painful, and clearly doesn't match its partner, is a limb that is dying for lack of blood. There is a window, a matter of hours, where that leg can often be saved, and every hour you wait, the odds drop. This is a 911 call, not a drive to urgent care, not let's see how it looks in the morning. Call and say the words, "My foot is suddenly cold, pale, and numb." So let me put the whole response into one clear ladder, the American version, because knowing the sign is only half of it. You have to know exactly what to do with it. At the bottom, notice and monitor. Is it there tomorrow? Is it both sides or one? Next, write it down which leg, what time, what you were doing, how long it lasted. For a mild, stable, both sides pattern, that's enough. Bring it up at your next visit. For something new, one-sided, or slowly worsening the predictable walking pain, the one-sided skin changes, phone your primary care doctor and get an appointment within the week. For a foot wound that won't heal, or rest pain at night, and it's after hours, that's what urgent care is for. Same day, evenings, and weekends. No appointment, and far cheaper and faster than the ER for something that isn't life-threatening. And at the top, a new one-sided swollen painful calf, or a foot that's suddenly cold, pale, and numb, or any leg symptom with chest pain or shortness of breath that is the ER now, or 911. Let me say the hard part out loud because I know it's real. An ambulance and an ER visit are expensive, and I know that's exactly why people talk themselves into waiting. So hear this from someone who watched it play out hundreds of times. The people who waited to save money almost always paid more in a leg that couldn't be saved, in a clot that reached the lungs, in weeks in the hospital instead of an afternoon. Being checked and sent home with good news is not a waste of anyone's time. That is a good outcome. And when it's a clot or a dying limb, the ambulance isn't just a ride. They start treatment on the way, and the ER sees you faster when you arrive by squad. Those minutes are the ones that save the leg. Let me stay on the practical side for a moment, because knowing the signs does you no good if you freeze when you see one. I want to walk you through what actually happens if you do the right thing so it feels less frightening to act. Say you notice one calf is newly swollen and tender. You call your doctor's office or you go to urgent care and you say the words plainly. One leg is suddenly swollen and it's tender. They know exactly what that sentence means. Often, the very next step is a quick, painless ultrasound of the leg, a wand, and some gel. No needles that can see a clot in minutes. If there's no clot, you've bought yourself peace of mind for the price of an afternoon. If there is one, you've caught it before it reached your lungs, and the treatment is usually a blood thinner, not surgery. That is a good day either way. The bad day is the one where someone sat at home with a swelling leg for a week because they didn't want to make a fuss. The same goes for the cold, pale foot. I've watched people apologize on the way in, certain they were overreacting. Almost none of them were. And on the rare times it turned out to be nothing serious. Not one of us thought less of them for coming. In emergency medicine, the person who comes in with a suddenly cold, pale foot and turns out to be fine is not a nuisance. They're doing exactly what I'd want my own father to do. The ones who haunt me are the ones who waited, who had every sign and every chance, and talked themselves out of it one more night. There's one more thing worth saying about weight and water, because small things add up here. Extra weight around the middle raises the pressure in the leg veins and makes the whole return trip harder, so even a modest amount of weight coming off eases heavy, swollen legs more than people expect. And staying reasonably hydrated keeps the blood itself less sludgy and easier to move, not a cure for anything, but a small, free tailwind. None of this is dramatic. That's the point. The legs respond to a steady accumulation of ordinary, boring, repeatable things far more than to any single heroic effort. Boring and repeated beats perfect and abandoned every time. And because so many of you live in places built for cars, not for walking, let me make the movement realistic. You do not need a gym or a sidewalk. Walk the aisles of the grocery store that's a flat, climate-controlled loop, and it counts. Walk the mall in the morning. Mall walking is a genuine institution for a reason, and in an icy winter or a brutal southern summer, it may be the safest surface you've got. Do slow laps around the yard. Park at the far end of the lot on purpose. If your balance is shaky, hold a cart or a rail. The point is the calf muscles squeezing, not the scenery. Even standing up from your chair every hour and marching in place for 30 seconds pumps those veins. 10 minutes, a few times a day, on whatever surface you can safely reach, does more for these legs than an occasional big effort you dread and skip. Now, I've spent a lot of this video on warnings, and I don't ever want to leave you sitting in fear with nowhere to go. So let me turn the corner, because the hopeful part of this story is genuinely bigger than the scary part. Here's the reassuring truth. The disease underneath most of these signs is one of the most changeable conditions in all of medicine. This is not a switch that flips and traps you. The plaque behind PAD responds to what you do. The nerve damage behind neuropathy slows down dramatically when the cause is controlled. Circulation is not fixed at birth or surrendered at 60. You have real leverage here, often more than with almost any other condition I treated. So let me give you the levers, roughly in order of how much they move the needle. The biggest one, by a mile, is this. If you smoke, stopping is the single most powerful thing you can do for the arteries in your legs. I'm not saying that to lecture you. I'm saying it because nothing else on this list comes close. Smoking is the strongest driver of PAD there is. It inflames and narrows exactly these vessels. And here's the part people don't believe until they see it. The benefit starts within weeks. Circulation to the legs measurably improves after you quit. At any age, even after decades of smoking. If you take one thing from today and act on it, and you smoke, let it be this one. Call your doctor and ask about what's covered, the medications and the quit programs, because on Medicare and most plans, that help costs you far less than you'd think, and it works far better than willpower alone. The second lever surprises people because it sounds like the opposite of what a sore, cramping leg would want. It's walking. For the predictable walking pain of claudication, structured walking is not just allowed, it's one of the most effective treatments we have. Better than many people expect, and backed by real trials. Here's how it works, and it's counterintuitive, so stay with me. You walk until the leg pain comes on and is moderate, not agonizing, just clearly there. Then you stop and rest until it fades. Then you walk again. You repeat that cycle for about 30 minutes, most days. Over weeks, that stop-start pattern actually pushes your body to build tiny new detour vessels around the blockage you are, quite literally, growing yourself a bypass. The distance you can walk before the pain hits gets longer. But, and this matters if you have those top-of-the-ladder emergency signs or a non-healing wound, you get evaluated first before you start any walking program. Walking is medicine for the narrowed artery, not the blocked one. The third set of levers are the numbers you already have a doctor for, and they all feed the same fire. Blood pressure. The American Heart Association line is 130/80, and getting there takes pressure off these vessels. Cholesterol. The plaque in your legs is built from it, and lowering it slows and can stabilize what's there. Blood sugar. High blood sugar damages both the pipes and the wiring, so it's doing double harm to your feet. You don't have to fix all three this week, but you do want to know your numbers, because you can't manage what you've never measured. And that leads to the one office visit I most want you to book. If you're 65 or older, your Medicare annual wellness visit costs you nothing, no copay, no deductible, and most people never use it. That's the visit to walk into with a short list. Ask your doctor to check the pulses in your feet. Tell them if you've had that predictable walking pain or a cold foot that doesn't match the other, and ask whether you need that ankle brachial index test, the 10-minute ankle versus arm blood pressure check I described. Ask for your blood pressure goal, your cholesterol numbers, and your blood sugar. Write the answers down. That single visit, which costs you nothing, can catch a narrowing artery years before it becomes the foot on my table. Now let me give you the tools you can use at home this week, because monitoring yourself well is genuinely useful, and it's how you'll know if something's changing. 3 simple ones. First, the 2-foot compare I mentioned, do it once a week. Bare feet, side by side, same light. Color, temperature, and the fingernail press test on each big toe. You're watching for one foot drifting away from the other. Second, if you have diabetes, look at the bottoms of both feet every single day. Use a mirror or ask someone, because your nerves may not report a cut, a blister, or a sore, and your eyes have to do the job your nerves can't. Third, keep a rough block count. Notice how far you can walk before any leg pain starts, and check it against yourself over the weeks. If that distance is getting shorter, that's a real change worth a call. If it's getting longer, your walking program is working. You're not looking for a perfect score. You're looking for the trend. Here's something people ask me, so let me answer it head on. Does food matter, or is that all hype? It matters, but let me put it in its proper place, because I think most videos oversell it. The foods that genuinely help are the ones that support that endothelial lining and its nitric oxide, leafy greens, beets, and other vegetables high in natural nitrates, plus the colorful fruits and the healthy fats that help protect your vessel walls. They're worth eating every day. But hear me clearly. A good diet is a great long-term investment in your arteries, and it is not a treatment for a cold, pale foot or a swollen, painful calf. Nobody has ever eaten their way out of a limb emergency. So enjoy the greens and the berries and the olive oil for the slow, compounding benefit they give, and keep the ladder we just built for the moments that actually count. I know for some of you, a quiet voice is saying it's too late that you've smoked for 40 years, or your arteries are what they are, so why bother? I want to answer that voice directly, because I heard it in the ER all the time, and it's wrong in a way that costs people. Your body does not hold a grudge for the decades. It responds to what you do next. The person who quits at 68 still gains better circulation than the person who keeps going. The leg that starts walking still builds new vessels. You are not too old for your arteries to answer you. The only version of too late that's real is the one where you never ask the question. Now let me name the 3 mistakes I watched people make over and over with exactly these symptoms, because avoiding them is half the battle. The first mistake is waiting for both feet to feel it. People expect a real problem to be big and symmetrical, so they discount the one cold foot, the one swollen calf, precisely because it's only on one side. But one-sided is the dangerous side. The mismatch is the message. Don't wait for it to spread to the other foot to take it seriously. By then you've lost your best warning. The second mistake is treating the symptom instead of the artery. Thicker socks, a heating pad, propping the feet up, a heavier blanket, these make a cold, heavy foot feel better, and there's nothing wrong with comfort. But comfort is not the same as fixing the pipe. If a warm sock quiets both feet, fine. That's reassuring. But if you find yourself needing more and more help to warm one foot that keeps falling behind, you are managing a smoke alarm by taking the battery out. Comfort the symptom if you like, but check the artery. The third mistake is expecting to feel the danger. This is the cruelest one, and it's why I keep coming back to it. The most dangerous circulation problems are often the quietest. Half the people with PAD have little or no classic pain. Diabetes can switch off the very alarm that should warn you. So please don't use "but it doesn't really hurt" as your reason to wait. Absence of pain is not absence of problem. That's the entire reason for the 2-foot check and the daily look you're using your eyes and your hands to find what your nerves might be hiding. Let me gather all of this into one pattern you can carry out of here, because that's worth more than any single fact. The body usually whispers before it screams, and with your legs, the whisper has a grammar. Both sides, gradual, comes and goes, eases when you rest or warm up, that's the floor, and you watch it. One side, different from its partner, one cold foot, one swollen calf, one leg that hurts. That's a specific message, and you call about it. Pain that comes on with walking every time and leaves with rest is pad knocking, and it's a call this week and a test to ask for. A wound that won't heal or pain in your feet at night is this week urgent. And a foot that suddenly turns cold, pale, and numb, or a new swollen, painful calf, especially with any chest pain or shortness of breath, that is 911 tonight, and you do not drive yourself. Watch it, call about it, or act on it right now. That's the whole ladder. Dennis kept his leg, by the way, barely, and only because someone finally got him to the ER that night instead of waiting for morning. He walks now, he quit the cigarettes, and the last time I saw him his 2 feet matched. But he'll tell anyone who listens that the warning had been there for a year, sitting quietly in one cold foot, wearing the disguise of ordinary aging. He just didn't know that one and both were different words. So here's your one small step, and it's free, and you can do it tonight. Take your socks off, sit down, and put your 2 feet side by side. Compare them color, warmth, the way the color comes back when you press a toenail. If they match, even if they're both a little cool, that's a good night's news. Sleep easy. If one has quietly fallen behind the other, you now know exactly what to do. You make a call this week, and you ask about it by name. And if someone you love keeps blaming a cold foot or a heavy leg on just getting older, share this with them, because the difference between one and both might be the most useful thing anyone tells them this year. Take care of your legs. They've carried you this far, and with a little attention, they'll carry you a lot further.